Security Breach's Mega Pizzaplex is massive, but there's quite a few locations in it that aren't used, or locations that are extremely underutilized, something that is even more problematic when the game itself is lacking in links. So, let's add to that. Today I'm going to go over some underutilized locations and come up with ideas for each of them. Now, before I start, I would like to propose an idea that I think would have made areas in Security Breach better. I think that in specific locations, the game should have implemented mini-games or levels like Help Wanted. I don't mean changing the whole game, but I feel like some areas, specifically the office segments, could have benefited from this. They kind of dabbled in this with the cooking a pizza minigame, but more of that would have been a good idea. Specifically because while I was coming up with ideas, I realized that the biggest problem with using these set pieces is stopping the player from just running by, which is a big problem. Security Breach has a detailed world, but it is so big and vacant that the player is encouraged to just run past things. And while running through the atrium avoiding animatronics is fine, it limits what you can do in smaller areas. Which is ironic considering that these smaller areas are so heavily detailed and people are likely not going to notice it. The daycare and sewer fix this by putting specific barriers, but something else must change if you want to utilize that area in a way beyond run and duck. Plus, Steel Wool made Help Wanted. If anything, they'd have an easier time making segments like that than balancing a huge open world. I just wanted to get that out of the way first because some of these ideas would definitely benefit from being Help Wanted based challenges. Now let's begin. And let's start with what will likely be the most attention-seeking idea of the bunch: fixing the daycare basement and Mazercise. So, in the Smash Up Monty mission, you go up to Mazercise and are told to go down to the daycare basement to get a key and come back to Mazercise to move the maze so that you can reach a vent to go down to the Monty boss fight. There are a few issues with this segment. The basement is a huge space filled with hiding places and little rooms, doors and desks. It's like a prop storage and a changing room for the theater above it. And there is nothing to do down there. You pick up the key, endoskeletons come in, and then you immediately use Freddy to escape. Even if you don't, the only way to really get through this area is to just run through. It's a big section with nothing in it. Theory speculation time. But I wonder if this might have been initially where Gregory runs into the shattered sun and moon. So a long time ago, I did a video where I laid out that I thought the unused creeping sun and moon animations, the ones where they're going around the corner and the running animation, the Sleep No More music track that has the noises of the daycare attendants ticking in it, the basement maze filled with moon posters and merch could have all been connected to a cut sun and moon section. A section that would result in them shattering, possibly give the first piece to upgrade Freddy with a usable battery pack, and give Gregory the idea to do the same to all the other animatronics. And then what happened was, my assumption is that, considering how much time constraint there was, this scene was too hard to play out, so this was cut, and both sections were replaced with endoskeletons. I remember someone, I think it might have been Scott, had a tweet, and they were like, wait until you get to the parts and service section. It's really cool. And then the parts and service section is just a weeping angel segment with non-scary endoskeletons. And I'm not saying the endoskeletons are bad, but with that much hype, I was expecting something a little better. And we still don't have the location of that come hither motion that Moon makes in one of the cut animations, so yeah, around tight corners would have made sense. Especially if it was Moon leading Gregory all the way to the center, and then the endoskeletons got released, that would have made more sense. I digress. That's not the point. The point here is that now we've got this basement location under the daycare theater. I don't know what it was initially used for, but as of now, it's not really used for anything. It's just a really nice set piece with no direction. This huge empty basement seems like the perfect place to have an encounter with the moon. But since we're adding to and not really changing Security Breach to that extreme, how about instead of there being a shattered section or whatever was initially planned there just straight up be a moon encounter down here. Gregory grabs the key and starts to leave. Up on the ledge there's like this tank of balls, plastic pit balls, with a tube that leads down into them. I hope I didn't just imagine that. Well, imagine Gregory's on his way out when he sees balls dropping and clattering and looks up to see Moon climbing out of that ball tank. Moon is now patrolling the area, and you can't just run past because of his speed, as he is now using his cut-run animation instead of his slink. So instead, Gregory must evade Moon through these makeup rooms and around the clutter to escape the basement. There's also one last chase up the stairs before Gregory loses him in the theater, Moon unable to leave without turning into Sun, so he doesn't follow. This would add a couple of things. One, it would have an actually tense Moon section other than the Daycare, because the sections where the hourly recharge turns over aren't exceptionally tense because most of the time you're right beside a recharge station. So this would set up a very unsettling scene with Moon. There would also be like that sort of progression. Moon initially in the Daycare slunk around and was easily distracted. Now you're down here, there's no distractions and Moon's moving a lot quicker. Like a continuation of the Daycare segment. Gregory heads up to Mazercise. Mazercise is another location that's severely underutilized. It has only one gimmick, and it's not the maze. It's a puzzle involving moving the maze where you press buttons until it's in the right position. And there's pretty much a dozen buttons you can poke around with. The puzzle is not fun, and most people don't even try to complete it. They just look up the solution. So, why not take that time waste out and replace it with more gameplay, perhaps a functioning maze? Gregory gets into the maze. The maze is a little bigger, and he just has to get to that back corner. There's only one problem. There's a short cutscene where Gregory's walking and he suddenly hears a soft jingle. He looks up. There's the sun right above him. Gregory manages to avoid getting swiped and gets away, and that's when the gameplay sequence begins. Gregory has to creep through the maze and get to the other side without being detected and grabbed by the sun. This is one of those help wanted segments I was talking about earlier. Like the Halloween level where you creep down the hallway, instead you're stuck in this maze while Sun is creeping along the top and being as quiet as he can. Save a random jingle or giggle here or there to identify what directions he's in. But when he's above you, you can hear a specific, located little jingle. In which case, if you do hear that jingle, you run. Because if you look up at him, he'll instantly get you. The trade-off being that if you run when he's jingling nearby, but not above you, he will be able to track you down. Sometimes he quickly scuttles and you can hear exactly where he is, but he moves very fast. Not only would these give Sun and Moon more sections in the game, but it would capitalize on what makes these two scary. A cramped space with plenty of places to hide but no distractions is a pretty good way to show off how threatening Moon is. There's no crutches. And Sun's overbearing presence is quite literally felt and having him creep around looking down at you, while you're surrounded by a suffocating but colorful kitty maze. Uncomfortable. Moon's section is stressful, but Sun's section is uncomfortable. It's one shade off from the level of the back rooms. And as you know, everyone loves the back rooms. Another underutilized location would be Chica's Cupcake shop. Tucked away in the second floor, the player is never required or incentivized to go there. But if you do go there, there is a hoodie upgrade. Yet the process of getting this upgrade is pretty flat, because you can just walk right in with Freddy, grab it, and leave. With all the staff bots gumming up the area, there's no real reason to explore. What I think would be the best outcome for this location would be to make it into an optional mission for the hoodie, in the vein of the loading dog mission. Instead of a kitchen, the back of the Cupcake shop is like a control room, like something you kind of would see in Afton Robotics, but instead it's controlling that fake cupcake factory outside of the Cupcake shop. Just as Gregory heads inside, he hears a banging and looks out into the Cupcake shop to see Chica coming in. "It's Chica, what do I do?" And Freddy tells him to press the large button on the console, to which Gregory does, starting up the processes. Freddy guides Gregory through the steps to create a line of cupcakes, during which Chica might wander into the kitchen. Gregory has to listen to her and hide either under the console or in another hiding spot to keep from getting caught, all the while going through the steps to make these cupcakes. Once he successfully makes a certain amount of cupcakes, a baker's dozen sounds key, but if it takes too long, then maybe 5 would just be fine. Chica ends up getting fully distracted and doesn't return back to the kitchen. Now Gregory is able to check the bathrooms and get the hoodie, then sneak away. Oh, and maybe if Chica's unshattered, it takes only 5 cupcakes, but if she is shattered, it takes a baker's dozen, therefore making this minigame harder if you've shattered her. Another location that I think could have gotten this treatment is the Glamrock beauty salon. See, if you want to get to best ending, where you free Vandy, you have to go to the salon. But you can accidentally skip the whole section. See, when you're heading into Roxy Raceway is a straight shot from the door you come in. And if you go off to the right, you find the Glamrock beauty salon. The Glamrock beauty salon and the Roxy Raceway are not directly connected together in any way. So basically, if you go to the Roxy Raceway, there's a good chance you're going to totally miss the beauty salon and you might come back later or you might forget. Even with this change, you still might miss it. In this case, at least there's more there than just staff bots. When Gregory enters the beauty salon, Roxanne Wolf comes in through a back door and the segment begins. Basically, Roxanne wanders around and gets tended to by the salon bots, while Gregory has to sneak past them to the door, then sneak to find a keycard, and then get through the back door. Roxanne's on guard, so he can only move safely when she's getting blow-dried, snipped, or the salon bots are making some sort of noise. Maybe even an added noise meter for this section would help. So Gregory can't just run by. If Roxanne notices you, the salon bots will race to get you, and jab you with their scissors. Possibly in the eyes. So anyway, he gets into the back where he does the Princess Quest 2 minigame. Afterwards, Roxanne hears him and tries to get in. Gregory escapes out the window, and then you have to sneak through and hide in the playground beside the salon to escape Roxanne, who's now searching for you outside. I think there's plenty of potential in a mission like this, even if it's just listening to Roxanne interact with the salon bots, or just seeing her in her own element. Just a little more characterization never hurts. Plus, it gives something more to do here. Now, if you do this section after Roxanne has been shattered, it'll be more difficult. Not only will Roxanne notice the noise easier and be the one to jump scare you directly, but she will also be frantically walking back and forth across the salon with less of a pattern, making it tricky for her to not just walk up on you. Now, our next location is actually going to contain a fair bit of cut content. So there was a mission that didn't make it in the security breach, but left behind a lot of clues for what it was supposed to be. The boiler mission, or the frozen endo mission. I'm going to play the sound clips in a moment, but let me quickly go over what the mission likely was supposed to be. Gregory finds a frozen staff bot in the freezer. He mentions it to Freddy. Freddy mentions that they can turn up the temperature, and by doing that, it will melt the staff bot and allow Gregory to get whatever the staff bot is holding. Here are the sound clips that were cut.
Freddy, it's cold in here. Freddy, it's freezing in here. That endo's frozen solid. It's holding some sort of camera?
Perhaps if you adjusted the heat in the boiler room, you could melt it. The boiler room is down in the utilidors. I will mark it on your map. However, I do not recommend you go there.
Hot! Too hot!
There's also at least one asset that made it past this cutoff point, and that is the frozen endoskeleton. So yeah, this mission was completely cut from the game. But if we reintroduce this mission, there might be something neat that we can add to it. So we don't know exactly where the boiler or the thermostat was going to be, but we can assume that it's somewhere down in the basement. A place that kind of looks like the right location would be the area that Monty comes blasting out of at the beginning of the game. Later in the game, that's sectioned off for a secret, but it would seem like it would make more sense if instead of that just being like a secret location to, you know... Okay, so, off topic. I remember at one point during the development of the game, they said there was a location where you could watch all the Fazbear and Friends episodes in the game. But instead, you can just find this little TV that plays like a looping section of it on it. So, yeah, it's technically still there. It's just not the same thing. I digress. Point is, if this location hadn't been used for secret, it could have instead been used for this boiler mission. And here's the thing I was thinking of. What creature do we know of that we suspect is really affected by temperature? And I'm not talking about Burn Trap. Gregory goes down these stairs and down the hallway and down this long section in the basement until he reaches this boiler control room. And maybe you can have like a little puzzle or minigame there, but either way, he turns all the knobs and he gets it working and it starts to heat up in there real fast. That's when Gregory says, "Ow, hot." He turns around and starts to run out. But suddenly, something comes out of a vent, and then out of the ceiling, and then out of a pipe. Dozens and dozens of these long coil-like tentacles, made of either thick wire or metal. The tentacles are reaching for Gregory, but he has to both quickly dodge around them and outrun them while trying to outrun the increasing temperature in the boiler room. So he's running out of there, trying to avoid the tentacles that are coming out of various locations and trying to beat the heat. Once he gets out, he's like, "Freddy, what was that?" And Freddy doesn't know. But it's kind of left on an open note, and Gregory goes back to the freezer where he finds that the frozen endoskeleton has been defrosted and he's able to get whatever key or disc or whatever they're holding in their hand. Now, why this section would be so incredibly important? Because the blob is not utilized anywhere in the game. I mean, okay, obviously it's utilized at the end, but kind of barely. I think one of the things that might have sort of hyped up the blob and gave it more of a feel in the game is if there were more sections where it appeared. In this case, this is only going to be one added section. But imagine how tense and uncomfortable that section would be. And then for the rest of the game, you're thinking, what were those things? What was that? And then when you get to the basement at the end of the game and you finally see the blob, you're like, oh my god. Not only that, but maybe you could add some voice to the blob. Now, I'm not even saying you have to add voice acting. You could just have it screaming and wailing as Gregory's trying to run. This segment would explain why the blob attacks Gregory at the end of the game, both because of its sensitivity to heat and maybe because it associates Gregory with that pain from the initial burn. Not to mention that it would foreshadow the later appearance of this otherwise unknown creature. As it stands, the blob just really appears at the end for no discernible reason. In this case, it wouldn't really fix explaining what the blob is, but it would at least allow them to have a presence before their reveal. It feels like it'd be a real tense way to first introduce the blob before we're literally dropped on his head later in the game. Now let's move on to pure indulgence, and that would be the prize corner, or the prize counter. Personally, I feel like the loading dock mission and the prize counter missions would both have to be doable in that order for this to really hit, but it's not a huge deal. The prize counter mission starts out normal. Gregory evades Roxanne and possibly Monty in the arcade. But instead of the office segment, I'm thinking of something a little different. I mean, I think this could maybe work with the office segment too. Just when it's done, Roxanne and Monty leave back through the arcade instead of the prize counter. Well, anyway, whether it be through the security doors or that tunnel leading from the arcade into it, Gregory makes his way into the prize counter. The prize counter is different now. There is a large present box by the shuttered entranceway and caution tape over the elevator doors. Gregory mentions both to Freddy as he walks up to them, and Freddy makes little comments. "Yes, it has been out for a few days. That is why you could not come up through the lobby. And that is where the prize puppet is. Do you hear music?" Yeah? Then that means he is sleeping. It is best if you do not disturb him." So Gregory doesn't. Instead, he goes around and into the back of the prize counter, into the VIP section where Gregory approaches a fire escape door and tries to open it. An alarm goes off, and an automated voice apologizes and informs Gregory that the roof access and the VIP area is restricted to VIP members only. Gregory complains to Freddy, who apologizes. They are interrupted by music suddenly playing overhead, a spacey and warbly version of Pop Goes the Weasel. Gregory asks what's going on. We cut to a cutscene where the camera swoops back into the prize box. We hear Freddy warning that the prize puppet is waking up before the lid pops open and the prize puppet reveals itself. I'm thinking a puppet in a spacesuit that makes uncomfortable breathing noises. Like each exhale sounds like a shush, and each inhale sounds like a strained gasp. Like, shh. Sort of. We're back in Gregory's POV, and Freddy warns him to hide. He runs further down the hall to the counter and hides behind it. The prize puppet is dangling from a track and comes up to the roof access door. Gregory has to sneak by and then sneak out of the prize counter. Now, the prize puppet functions by teleporting to distinct locations around the prize counter, wandering on its track, and then disappearing. The preferred mechanic would be that the prize puppet only disappears or despawns when you're not looking at him. Thus, you could technically keep him pinned down by staring at him, but that also risks him spotting and pursuing you. Considering Security Breach's issues with spawning and despawning, I don't think this would ever work, but it's an idea. Either way, Gregory makes it all the way back to the tunnel that leads back into the arcade when he hears something and turns around to see the prize puppet at the door. Its track stops at that door. Gregory makes some sort of gremlin comment about it when the puppet suddenly detaches itself from its track and crumples to the floor. It gets up on wobbly legs and begins to pursue. Now it's a run back through the arcade. The walking prize puppet doesn't teleport around as quickly as before, but the lights have gone dark, and you can only rely on your flashlight and the breathing noise to locate where he's coming from. And I mean like pitch dark. Like there's no lights on at all. There's no neon. There's no arcade machines. It's just pitch black in that room. And you can only use that breathing noise to know where he is. Gregory makes it to El Chips, where the pursuit ends. He then ducks under the door to the atrium, only to be grabbed by Vanessa. Returning to the prize counter shows that the prize puppet's still wandering around. It will begin to chase you if you wander around, but won't leave the prize counter again. A neat thing to implement would be that if you get all the golden plushies and thus become a VIP, the prize puppet would no longer chase you. Not a huge thing, but a detail. Or who knows, maybe it spouts confetti to celebrate your VIP hood before Freddy sets the whole place on fire. Imagine the VIP fire ending, the rooftop escape, Freddy tackling Vanny off the roof, Gregory finding out the truth about who she is, and the only change is that the prize puppet is just there the entire time. No explanation why, he's just present. But I digress. Now, I'm not saying any or all of these added sections would have fixed the issues with the game or would have fixed the story or any of that, but I think the additions would have been neat. They would have utilized locations that hadn't been built up to their potential. It would have added more scenes for characters who direly needed it, such as the Blob. My only point of contention was that I couldn't figure out a good place to have an extra Monty section, so if I ever do a second version of this, I might have to figure out and work one in, because I feel out of all the Glamrocks, Monty is definitely the one who needs at least a little more to do. And I know something like adding the prize puppet is just, again, pure indulgence on my part because I love the puppet so much, but I think there's a way to make that creepy enough that I can excuse my personal bias. Because one of the biggest problems with these locations and how they're underutilized is because they're not utilized for what they're supposed to be. That is the biggest problem with these locations. Let me go through them one more time real quick. The daycare basement is fully furnished with a bunch of stuff in it that you can hide behind, but the mechanics that are stuck in it, the endoskeleton sections, do not benefit from you hiding. That section is broken with Freddy. It wouldn't be broken with Freddy with the moon, because the moon can grab you out of Freddy. Mazercise has nothing to do with the maze. Like, the puzzle for the maze is there, but the maze itself actually isn't anything. Like, you get this whole big maze built up, but then you get in there and it's really tiny and it's pretty much not a maze, and nothing happens really in it other than that puzzle section. So adding a larger section to that would have benefited it. The Cupcake shop, just nothing happens there. The beauty salon, nothing happens there. The prize counter is another disappointment because, okay, I'm gonna be completely honest. So I went into Security Breach pretty blind, and I did not expect a puppet animatronic, but I was hoping there was going to be a puppet. But my disappointment wasn't just that there was no puppet, it was that when you get up to the prize counter, there's kind of nothing there. I mean, like, you just basically walk past Roxanne and that's the end of it. There's no special gimmick to the location. Some of these locations do have special gimmicks. That one does not. Adding more of these gimmicks to locations would make them feel a little more complete. Let's compare Fazer Blast and Mazercise. Imagine if Fazer Blast was in the same state as these other sections, where you go in and you don't actually play the game. You just walk through the maze to the other side, and then you grab something, and then you run out while endoskeletons are walking through the maze. So, those are some of the ideas I have. I might readily make another video like this again, if I come up with some good ideas and if people are interested, but we'll see. For now, thank you for watching.